Rezero Season 3 Episode 1. I'm finally back, so let's get right into it. I was originally intending to do a sort of in real time reaction that a lot of YouTube channels do. However, I knew that the episode was a bit longer. I didn't expect it to be 1 hour and a half, so those plans quickly went out the window. So this will be a sort of postpartum reaction. I made some notes, very elegant notes, very professional for such a small YouTuber to make notes. Wow. And I'm going to go through them and pretty much tell you my thoughts on the first episode. So let's start with the important things. Subaru's jumpsuit. There is no way, even with Subaru's sewing skill, with the materials they have available in Lugunica, there's no way that jumpsuit has held on for more than a year with all of the stuff that Subaru has been through. So my suspension of disbelief is completely shattered. No way, I can take it. Season ruined. Let's move on. Okay, for real though, the first thing that immediately stood out to me were the character designs, and I had already spoiled some stills of the character designs, which is fine, but seeing the characters actually move, everybody looks a lot more puffy and their face looks rounder. Everybody looks like they just had a huge burger with fries and some ice cream and they're all bloated from some fast food, which was a bit distracting initially, but I quickly got used to it. For some reason, I think the character that got hit the most was Emilia. She's puffier in the chest zone, but also in the face area. She looks very puffy in some angles, and it's not always consistent. It depends on if it's a side angle or how the character is speaking, but it's just something that I noticed. And I think the designs in the light novels are already very roundy and cutesy, and sometimes I get annoyed at them, especially for Elsa, because I think Elsa in some artworks looks gorgeous and creepy and feminine, and in others she just looks like a cute high school teacher. These designs aren't super distracting, I quickly got used to it, but just something that I noticed, especially because I was rewatching a few episodes of the first season a few days ago, and yeah, especially Emilia, you really can see that there's a bit of a fluffiness going on here. I will say though, in the complete opposite direction, I think that Garfiel's character design looks rougher and edgier for some reason, and maybe it's just me completely misremembering Season 2's character designs, but I don't know, to me, he just looks a bit cooler now for some reason. He is technically 15 instead of 14, so, you know, teenagers grow a lot very fast. And also, I have to mention Reinhard. He seems less like a slick knight and more like a generic isekai protagonist, which really suits him for the type of character that he is. He is the hero after all, just not the protagonist. We did start at the mansion, which to me is obviously pretty cool. Like I said in my preview video, I obviously would love if they could adapt everything from the light novels and perhaps even add some anime-only goodness, but obviously there are some time constraints, which we did notice in some scenes. However, unlike what I perhaps predicted they could do, which is to start at Pristella directly and do some sort of retroactive exposition, they did start at the mansion, which was nice. This volume is a sort of buffer volume in between arcs for light novel readers, but it also works perfectly as a sort of buffer episode to really catch the anime onlys up to speed, remind them who the characters are and how some of the relationships have evolved. For example, I really like that cute scene right at the beginning between Subaru and Beatrice. You can really see that they have grown a lot closer together now that they are Spirit and Spirit Knight, and their mannerisms are all cutesy and show that they really are in sync. I also loved the progress in Emilia and Subaru's relationship, in which Emilia does in fact state that kissing does not make a baby, which was a bit surprising to me. I did have to pause the episodes and make a few phone calls to just check on some things, don't worry about it, but besides that, I really like the evolving relationships, and it's a great scene to really catch everybody up to speed. I will say though, I wish we had a bit more Rum, just a bit, because Rum just steals the show every time she's on, but unfortunately this arc isn't really a Rum-centric arc, but don't worry, we will have more of her in the future. I think they did a good job with the Joshua scene. They quickly established his weird affection for his brother, and while I think they trimmed a bit of the dialogue if I recall correctly, I think they did a good job at summarizing everything. One scene which felt very jarring to me though was the scene with Otto, Garfiel and Subaru. In this year time skip, these three have really grown together as friends and as comrades in the Emilia camp. So this conversation had a lot more to it, but in the anime it felt cut so short that I'm not even sure what the point of it was. They didn't really establish much of the friendship between the three. It felt like the scene just breezed by. It was super jarring, to be quite honest. And the thing is, I thought that the only purpose of this scene was to present Otto as the new officer of the Emilia camp, but then this information is reiterated later in the episode. So to be quite honest, this scene was so short and so trimmed down from the light novel that if they removed it, I don't even think we would miss much. Once again, the anime adaptation just can't adapt everything from the light novel one-to-one, and I have read Arc 5 a year ago or so things may not be super fresh in my memory, but there are some scenes where the pacing feels a bit abrupt, and this is definitely one of them. Just a final nitpick on the character designs. Roswell, for example, also looks atrocious. He had this sort of slick, very masculine face in season 1, and here he looks like a puffy clown, which maybe in character, who knows, perhaps. And meanwhile, Rem looks super pretty. So it's strange how this art style feels a bit all over the place. Some characters look prettier, perhaps even better than they were before, and other characters just look a bit clownish. On the way to Pristella, I immediately chuckled because Garfiel is just outside the carriage doing the Naruto run, and it's a shame because they did cut one of the scenes from the light novel from volume either 14 or 15, I can't quite recall, where they explain why Garfiel is running alongside the carriage. They explain his blessing in more detail. They did approach it briefly in season 2 of the anime, but they didn't quite give it an in-depth explanation as they did in the light novel. So for anime onlys, they may be a bit confused, like why is this edgy teenager running like Naruto? But then they remember he's 15 and it all starts to make sense. But no guys, it's not just the edginess or the teenagehood, it's also his blessing, which hopefully will be a bit more explored in a few moments to come. I really like that, much like in the light novel, they use Otto as a sort of serious, straight man. He's the perfect character to deliver a bunch of exposition, not only to catch the audience up to speed about the royal selection and remind them that there is a royal selection going on because it was a bit sort of cast aside during season 2, it wasn't the focus point of the story, and also to catch up what the other candidates are up to. There is another moment of recap, which is already in Pristella, where Liliana sort of recounts Subaru's deeds, and honestly I really like these scenes, not only because they are integrated into the story and dialogue smoothly, so you don't feel like you're watching just a boring flashback, but it's very useful, especially for anime onlys who may have last seen Rezero a few years ago, to really remind them of what is going on and what our main character has been up to. Once they arrive at the city, I think that Pristella looks very good. It looks colorful, it looks gorgeous, it looks lively with lots of things going on, lots of lapras just going around carrying people and merchandise. I think the city looks very good. If I were to be nitpicky, I will say that in some scenes in Pristella the CGI does look a bit clunky, but they are very few and far between. I think that if you're just watching casually and not even paying a super ton of attention, perhaps you won't even notice them, especially if you're watching with subtitles. And yeah, those are very few and far between. I think for the most part Pristella looks very gorgeous and the scenes look very lively. And speaking of gorgeous and lively, our animators sure know what they're doing, because when Anastacia is introduced, oh my goodness, what is going on? Beatrice then asks for some pastries, but as far as I can see, Anastacia is already looking like a snack. After some more exposition and a fairly comedic scene in which Subaru asks a hundreds of years old shut-in NEET for directions in the outside world, not a super great idea, they then meet Liliana, and this scene was first of all quite artistic. I liked the doves or whatever, that was quite a nice touch. And then in the middle of Liliana singing, Subaru starts rapping, singing, phrasing things musically. I don't even know what that was, but it made me laugh quite a lot. As much as the Subaru rapping bit was a bit jarring, but it was an interesting choice, I guess. I really can't recall if that happened in the light novel, but I certainly, in my head, did not imagine it to sound like that, if that makes sense. But anyway, besides that, I really think they did a good job at quickly establishing the relationship between Subaru and Liliana. Like I said in my preview video, they could either make Subaru and Liliana meet for the first time in the anime, or they could make the very awkward choice of of having Subaru meet Liliana again and sort of allude to an event that happened in a side story that was never animated in the anime. I was a bit hesitant of having Liliana meet them for the first time choice because it could make the resulting story decisions a bit awkward because they don't have much of an established relationship. However, I will admit, I was wrong. I think they did a good job. Liliana, because of the type of character she is, she quickly grows attached to people and she's very warm and gets along very well with people. And under the pretext of helping Subaru so that he can tell her his stories, I think it makes a lot of sense that she would so quickly help them. So I was wrong. I think having them meet for the first time is the best choice. Now, we do have to address one very important thing, which is Subaru's nickname, and I was watching on Crunchyroll, so the translation may not be the same for other services that eventually this may stream on, but they translated Yojo Tsukai as Little Girl User, and oh my goodness, officer, it's this one right here. Go get him, go get him. FBI, open up! I don't know why they did this. It's just, it sounds so bad in English. It's just so awkward. It just sounds so wrong. It sounds illegal. It doesn't roll off the tongue. And it's just honestly super bad. I get that if they didn't want to use a lollymancer, which is hilarious by the way, because it's sort of like the fan accepted translation, they could just use the translation, the official translation from Yen Press, which is Moppet Mage. Moppet Mage is also super funny. I know that some people have some problems with the Yen Press translation, and trust me, I have some problems too, especially with the Overlord books. However, sometimes they do have strokes of geniuses, and Moppet Mage is just a super hilarious, tongue-in-cheek, and really fits the character perfectly. And I wish that they had used Moppet Mage because Little Girl User is just not it. It's just... no. The conversation with Kiritaka was also cut shorter, at least from what I remember, but honestly I don't think we lose much there. I don't think it's super relevant or anything. I did think that, for example, in the scene where Subaru comes in with Liliana, I think that him grabbing her and all that stuff, it doesn't make as much sense if he had just met her a few minutes ago, but then again, it's Liliana and then again, it's Subaru, so it sort of evens out. I didn't really remember some of the voice actors for some of the characters, and some of them really surprised me. One in particular was Regulus, the Archbishop of Greed, and spoilers I guess, but in the anime it was super obvious, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but anyway. The voice actor for Regulus is the same, at least it sounded to me like the same as Katsura from Gintama, and I'm going to be honest guys, it's going to be a bit tough for me to take some of those scenes seriously because I'm just going to hear Katsura all the time, but I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try my best to really focus. I really liked the scene between Garfiel and Reinhard. That scene was just perfect. Reinhard is just there, nonchalantly just speaking as if it was an everyday occurrence. Meanwhile, Garfiel is just sweating for his life, trying his best, and Reinhard is just, sorry man, I'm a bit overpowered. Once again, I really think that the blander look really fits Reinhard more than any other character, especially in scenes like this where he's just no-selling his opponent. Once already in Pristella, this sort of prelude act between getting to Pristella and actually then moving on to the meat, the juiciest part, the theater of Malice, is where I think the pacing was noticeably a bit abrupt at some points. For example, I think that Willhelm just sort of appeared on screen and there he is, and okay, maybe I'm just biased because Willhelm is one of my favorite characters, but it felt like he was introduced without much gravitas or pomp or some celebration or anything. And once again, sure, Krush is technically speaking the more important character, but even her, I don't think they were really introduced with the proper grandeur I was expecting, especially because they didn't really appear in season 2 besides the first few episodes, so I don't know, it felt a bit sudden to me. Krush's character design is also a bit blushier. She looks very warmer and kinder and softer now, which, knowing the circumstances of the story, makes perfect sense. I really like her character design now, it fits her more. We then transition into a scene where Garfiel is just moping around after being completely no-sold by Reinhardt, and oh my goodness, what are those? Arr, arr, arr. I think that Elsa is completely prepared for the water city of Pristella, because with those floaties she will never drown. So yeah, her character design, it feels just a tad, just a bit exaggerated. That feels quite a bit unhealthy, like it's about to burst. But then again, she's not alive anymore, so maybe now we know the reason why Garfield truly won. Moving on from best girl Elsa. I also really liked the reveal of Garfield's mother. It felt very sudden, very surprising. I really liked the atmosphere, the color scheme, and the voice acting. The only thing I will say is that much like the entirety of this act, it felt a little bit, just a bit faster than it should. I wish that moment had a little bit more to breathe, but overall it was pretty well done. Later we have a scene between Willhelm and Subaru, and unlike some of the others, I think this scene had the appropriate amount of time. It flowed, it vibed well, it had time to breathe. I particularly like the color scheme, a lot of blue with the moonlight, which also reminds me of what is to me the best cover in all of Rezero, Volume 20. I really like the dialogue in this one. You can really feel the connection between Subaru and Willhelm, and also Wilhelm's frustration at being unable to maintain this relationship that he has with technically a stranger, right? With also his grandson. And you know, it's a very melancholic scene. I like it a lot. And also we saw in a sort of flashback middle-aged Willhelm, which maybe I'm misremembering, but I think this is a sort of new shot. I don't remember this artwork from the light novel, so it's always nice. So now we have young rascal Willhelm, old man Willhelm, and a middle-aged frustrated Willhelm. All the facets of Willhelm. Before we move on to the Astrea family drama once again, I really wish that they hadn't cut a scene where a lot of the Royal Selection characters are appreciating Subaru for all that he has done, and Subaru is just mega awkward and imposter syndrome-like, deflecting all of the compliments, and I think that scene was very good, and I understand why they didn't do it. Not only were they strapped for time, but technically speaking, it would be repeating information with a previous scene that Liliana already had, where she reiterated that exact same thing. However, I think it would have meant more if it was said by those characters instead of Liliana. Saying it by Liliana makes it seem like the common people, the normal people of Lugunica also know how incredible Subaru is, which is nice, but I think that the validation from the other royal candidates and their respective knights would be a lot more important, especially for the audience to really understand Subaru's standing. So I'm a bit bummed that that scene was cut, but once again, it is more or less what I expected. I think this 1 hour and a half episode already included way more than I was guessing, so I can't complain too much. We then get the Astrea family drama and known stir of the pot Pristella, and I have some thoughts about the voice acting in this scene. The first one is I immediately went and checked if Pristella had changed voice actresses, because apparently she didn't, but I remembered her voice to be a bit more deep and a bit more arrogant and cocky. For some reason, her voice felt a little bit too kind to be Pristella, if that makes sense. I'm hoping that she really get into her third gear as the arc goes on, but her voice felt a bit un-Pristella-like. Maybe it's just me misremembering season 1, it's been a while, but I don't know, her voice didn't feel super arrogant and aristocratic as I expected it would be. Contrasting with that, I really loved the voice acting for Willhelm here. It sounded very desperate, very pleading, almost pathetic, and it's a super huge contrast with what you're used to seeing from Willhelm, so dignified, so knightly, and it's in this arc that you really start to see the weaknesses and flaws of Willhelm, and not just his lousy cooking skills, but also the whole family issues that he has, and I really love the voice acting for him here. Once again, I really like how the animation makes the characters of Rezero feel alive and expresses things much simpler and faster through images than perhaps it ever could through words. For example, I really like the scene, it's very casual, where Subaru is just walking with Beatrice holding her hand. It's very cutesy and it really displays the relationship of sort of older brother, younger sister, even though she's much older than he is, but you know, it's Rezero. And I really like scenes like that, and it's why I watch the anime. I think they're doing an excellent job. They teased us a little bit with Pristilla's dancing. They showed us just a glimpse of it and then quickly went away. And you know, it is what it is. They can't fit everything, and it would be another gorgeous moment of animation that they would have to spend money on. But still, I think they're teasing us for the right reason. I really have high hopes for Pristella in this arc. Let's see if they deliver. And finally, we transition into the theater of Malice, and Sirius's debut was amazing. First thing I noticed, and I quickly went to Google to confirm it, is that she has a different voice actress from Fortuna. And I'm not saying that Sirius is Fortuna, but I'm also not saying she isn't. And I think they did an excellent job at animating Sirius. Her bandages, her messed up hair, her eye is super creepy. Whenever she closes her eye, you can see that it's sort of burned or scarred or something is wrong with her. And the best part is the contrast between her very creepy appearance, her very eerie dialogue, and then the way that she phrases things is super cutesy, and also her mannerisms. I loved how they animated her mannerisms. She just looks super girly, like a teenager at a shopping mall. She looks super girly, and that enhances the creepiness all that much. And then the ending, I was very curious how they were going to do it, because it's a very gruesome, creepy scene, and also it involves a younger person. So I was curious if they were going to censor it. I don't care as much as, for example, the slight change to Liliana's character design, but I did care a lot what they were going to do for this scene. And thankfully it was creepy, disturbing, amazing, just a great first start for our Simba, the Lion King. Stop. I'm going to hell for this one. A great start to Rezero Season 3. Overall, I love the first episode. I think they did an excellent choice at starting the second episode later after Sirius's introduction. I think this episode, the entirety of Volume 16, serves perfectly as a sort of prologue episode before the real stuff starts. I think if we had a lot of 20-minute episodes with characters just yapping and a bunch of exposition, I think people may have been a bit turned off by it. This episode being almost like a full-length movie is an amazing choice. The character designs overall look a bit puffier than they did, especially the women. They look puffier in the face and in the chest, but still, I think I quickly got used to it. It's not something that I mind, so maybe some people don't like it as much, but to be fair, it is closer to the art style of the light novel than perhaps the last season was. I think they did a good job at recapping everything for an anime only. If you're an anime only, you should not be confused by now. And if you are super confused because you truly don't remember anything, then maybe you're the type of person that should probably either see a recap video or just go watch the previous seasons. And I think they did a good job at explaining everything and changing things enough, for example, the Liliana situation, where nothing is confusing or out of place. Like I said in my preview video, I am particularly curious what they're going to do about the Al situation, and in case some of you watching this are anime only, I won't spoil, but I will say they cut some very important dialogue from Volume 4, which I think they will need to address or perhaps reshuffle into some of these episodes so that things make sense. So I'm very curious what they do about that. This episode was great. I'm super hyped for this new season of ReZero. Some of the stuff that's going to happen is going to be super cool, and let me know in the comments if you prefer the sort of postpartum reaction where I just go off some notes and react to stuff, or if you prefer the stuff that some YouTubers do where I react in real time. I think that the editing on that is a little bit harder, so I can't promise anything, but we will see. So this was it for me today, folks. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and if you're an anime only, you can now watch spoiler-free my review of Volume 16 of the light novel. Maybe it's something you want to do, just letting you know. Anyway, ciao.